Let's get a quick take on Denver Mayor Michael Hancock kicking off the campaign to pass new hotel and rental car taxes to fund an $856 million expansion of the National Western Complex. Patty Calhoun for Westward. We knew this was coming, but this is the official big kickoff. What do you think, and what are the chances of folks stepping to the plate and saying again, let's raise taxes for this?
Well, no one loves the stock show more than I, but I do think this is going to be challenging. People, even though there are no new taxes, this would be an extension of currently existing taxes. People are looking around Denver and they're saying it's growing. I don't like how fast it's growing. The streets are crowded. So I think this is going to have to be a really strong campaign to convince people this is a good move for the future. They've got a couple months to do it. They can do it, but they're going to have to work hard.
David Copeland from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. I realize this is one of these taxes that goes to other people, presumably, even though an average Denverite or Coloradan is going to be renting a car to stay in a hotel every once in a while. But do you think that will help it pass, even though it is the extension of another tax?
Sure, because it fulfills Senator Russell Long, longtime chair of the Senate Finance Committee, observed that the rule in taxes is don't tax you, don't tax me, tax that fella behind the tree. And so when you're a Denver voter, out-of-towners who are going to hotels are the fellow behind the tree, so you say, why not tax them? Here's the answer to that. You have a finite capacity on how much you can tax that fellow behind the tree before he decides to go to some other tree. To keep Denver economically strong as a convention city, bringing in those people, you can't infinitely raise taxes or have high taxes on them. So if you want to have a certain level of high taxes, maybe you can, and that's a good idea to spend on worthwhile projects. But when you spend it on welfare for big business, which is what this does, that means you've given up the capacity to tax that fellow behind the tree for something more deserving that'll benefit the public, rather than like schools or parks or something useful, rather than for corporate welfare. So again, the mayor is making Denver a sanctuary city for corporate welfare. I think that the taxes on the fellows behind the trees and in the Hilton hotels ought to be used for something more constructive for the people of Denver.
Eric Sonman, political analyst. At the end of the day, the National Western Stock Show complex is known in Colorado and Denver as a really hot spot for about 3 weeks in January, and occasionally some other events. I love going to the dog show there in February, but I can't say I ever go there more than once or twice a year. Is that going to become part of the issue when folks are voting on this tax, even though it's not something on their exact paycheck, but something that they do if they want to rent a car or go to a hotel?
No, I do think it becomes an issue. I think people have an affinity here for the stock show, but it's more of sort of a romantic affinity than it is one of, it's something I really do and I'm a regular there and whatever. I think, you know, the stock show is much more a magnet for outsiders than it is necessarily a central feature for a lot of Denverites. My view is that the default position in Denver, unlike in most parts of the state or the country, the default position on any tax issue is no. And the burden is on the proponents to sell it. I think actually in Denver over the past decade or more, the default position is yes. That said, I do think we're going to get to a point at some point. I don't know if it's this year, I don't know if it's 2015, I don't know if it's 16, I don't know if it's 17. At some point we're going to get to a point where the voters of Denver say enough. I don't know if it's going to be the stock show issue. I don't know if it's going to be the college scholarship issue. I don't know if it's going to be the $10 million check to Adams County. I don't know if it's coming next year with SCFD or performing arts complex redo or DPS bond issue, mill levy. Some point down the road, you're going to hit a saturation point. It's just a question of when and on what issue.
Natasha Gardner, senior editor of 52A Magazine, wrap it up for us.
Well, I don't think the saturation point will come with this particular issue because it's an existing tax. Those are easier to sell to voters. One thing I think that's interesting about the revitalization of this area, I last year spent a lot of time in the Globeville neighborhood working on a story for that. One of the things the long-term residents talked about was the heyday of both the Denver Coliseum and the stock show and how much that trickled into their neighborhoods, sort of the additional benefits of the events constantly being there and then people being on those streets. So 3 neighborhoods, Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea, that desperately need some economic booming or just a trickle would be helpful. This will be able to do that for them.